on air?
We're on air.
Are we?
We're on air. Yeah, we're live. Yeah, but you weren't live a second ago when you said that.
Okay.
Luckily. Hopefully nobody heard that. We might have to edit it out at the beginning. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am going to start out. Let's see. I'm going to wait here. Okay, we've got somebody watching. I'm going to reach out to you viewers. Do me a favor. Let me know that you can hear us okay. We're trying out a new microphone setup. This is one of my first times having my guest live in studio. So we're trying out the lavalier mics instead of the podcast mics. So comment below whatever platform you're watching on. Yes. Do you hear us?
1, 2.
La la
red
la
sweater.
la 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 la. That red sweater looks really nice on you.
I think so, Benjamin. Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes. Your the striped shirt was messing with the camera a little bit, so we had to do a quick wardrobe change.
I'm keeping it. I think Perrin always gives me a complimentary CAX mug, so this is you're outdoing.
Oh,
tell me no, it's for the cause.
I didn't know that I needed to have gifts for my guests. I should order more of
Start now.
Oh, you know what? You could have a generally irritable mug, or do you have a copy?
Get back here.
Wait, do you have a copy of the book? Of our book?
Huh?
Of my book?
Oh no, it's it's like 10,000 words.
So Benjamin, we're gonna need to order some books so that we can offer gifts to our guests. So this is your own. I'll autograph it for you even before you go.
Every page.
It is our Benjamin and I's book, Reasons to Trust the Government. And yes, it is very wordy.
Yes.
As in not wordy at all. So anybody who's confused.
You just always tell that.
But anyway, so here's your gift for coming on the show.
Means I have to give the sweater back. So thank you.
Okay.
I hear you.
Let's see what. Medic Knight says, John, come and volunteer for Erica's campaign for Congress! Exclamation point. Yeah,
I'm here.
We're one of the things that. Well, okay. So again, people watching. Make sure you can hear us. Just comment in the chat and let us know that you can hear us. As you guys can see, my guest this evening is Mr. John Klar, and I am very, very pleased to have him on. John and I met back in 2020, or was it 2019 that we met? And then your campaign was in 2020. Yeah. And I was really inspired by John and his campaign for governor in 2020. I was really encouraged and impressed with his passion for Vermont and for politics and his care for the well-being of Vermonters and the nation, frankly. I was... as much as I didn't want to run for office because I wanted to just be like, screw this place. John was really this light and this encouragement for a lot of us to take a stand for our home and to practice what we were preaching, which is that people should be participating in their self-governance. And we got called the John Klar Republicans. You were like the leader, and all of us that ran down ticket.
We had 38 people run with us in the end.
Yeah.
So we showed what you could do if you brought people. We also had cohesive messaging, and we supported one another. We're going to do it again, aren't we?
Yes, absolutely.
It was a test run.
Yep. And the goal this year is to get 100 candidates more to run across the state. We're putting together teams of people to help with mentoring and things like that.
If you're interested in running, let us know, and we will try to find people to support you. Very grassroots, but we're finding some really wonderful, if it's all right that I contribute here, we're finding some really wonderfully skilled and talented Vermonters of very diverse backgrounds willing to stand up. And we're seeing more and more what we might call walkaways, or people that were swing voters, and a lot of Democrats who are worried about the far left extremism that's here in Vermont. So there's really a lot more energy this time around than 2 years ago. And if we don't capitalize on it, then we're kind of throwing away the candy store and leaving the keys in the wrong hands.
That's not a good idea. I like me some candy, and I want to eat it.
Well, let's talk about some Well, you're the boss. A lot of what I'm here to talk about is what I think will help our candidates and all Vermonters going forward, and that's why.
Absolutely, amen. So that's what we're going to talk about. Okay, so you can hear us fine. Okay, excellent. That's good. John is an excellent speaker. Seen him at several state house rallies. That's one of the things. It's so funny, John.
Thank you.
You're a polarizing figure, which I think is really funny.
I don't know why.
Because there's a lot of us who I hate to say love you because that sounds like so, whatever, but there's so many of us who have appreciated you, appreciate your smarts, your knowledge, your care, because you're not just John Klar from down the road. You're not just John Klar who used to be a lawyer. You're also an organic farmer. You have just this wealth of knowledge to share. And it's funny to me that people don't always have the ability to appreciate what you bring to the table.
I don't know if that's a question. I think that what I'm bringing to the table is something that is a little novel in politics nationally. And I'll make an analogy with a guy named Robert Redford, who I saw in an interview some years ago. I think it was in an independent film conference. And he said, the one thing in film that Americans are really desperate for is authenticity. And so what I think you're referring to about me is that, first of all, my skill sets, whatever I've learned, have always been driven by an idea of public service. And I'd never planned on being a lawyer. And a politician. I didn't plan on being a lawyer either. And I didn't plan on being a farmer either. But all of these skill sets, it was because of my illness that I fell into farming and stopped practicing law. But now I bring those disciplines together and I try to offer to Vermonters. And so one of the things that might make me I'm unvarnished. Yeah. I'm not going to pretend to be something. That's not what politicians do. So it's take it or leave it. But what I'm finding is people, like Robert Redford said, they're responding to that. You're unvarnished. You're honest. You're willing to make a mistake and say, I'm sorry. You're willing to tell the truth instead of lie. We see so many people, politicians, it's as if telling the truth is verboten.
Well, and that's what I would rather be honest and straightforward and candid with people, warts and all, because I don't personally know anybody who hasn't.
I don't see any warts.
I mean, they're there. They're there. My glasses. We just polished them up a little bit.
But I think this is the question to cut into the voters. Yeah. I remember, and I make this analogy, I remember when Jimmy Carter was asked in an interview, do you know where I'm going? No. Jimmy Carter was asked in an interview for his reelection if he had lust in his heart. And the silly Democrat went and said the truth and said yes. And he was excoriated by the religious right. So he was punished for telling the truth, which is kind of a simple truth. I mean, if you look at the Bible, I got no lust in my heart at all. You got the whole, that's the guy we want, the guy that lies to us. Remember? I never inhaled. I smoked pot, but I never inhaled. And you rewarded him for that. Everybody knew and Obama lied to us about Monsanto. Obama lied to us about GMO labeling. Obama lied to us about Wall Street. He lied to us about Ukraine. How many times are we going to lie to when we're still going to reward people for telling us lies? So for us, it's take it or leave it. And we have a lot of liars in our legislature right now. And a lot of what I'm doing, which makes me controversial, is I'm exposing people like Carolyn Partridge, who is encouraging people as a legislator to vote illegally in her town and then lies and says she didn't. All the emails are there. Critical race theory in our schools. They're lying and saying they're not teaching it. No, they're just applying it. They're upending Martin Luther King, and they're indoctrinating children to select what gender they are at age 5. And I say that is maybe not a good idea, and that makes me controversial. Then I'll be controversial. Well, but that's what we need. This is, It
is. I think you're right. I think that people, even though they say they want authenticity, when you say what is true and it goes against
their belief systems,
or it comes in conflict maybe with their ideology or what they believe about themselves, it's like an immediate rejection, right? It's that like, what is that bias?
Well, there's that issue of our psychologies. I mean, and there are ways that we can exchange ideas, but I see this right now with a lot of people, and actually it gets us to the subject of speaking about the truth. Let's talk about my book, if you don't mind, because that's a really good opportunity to show an example of things that challenge people's ideas, with truth.
And so that's what you guys, so I asked John to come on today specifically to talk about the book that he's got coming out, that he's written. It's in publishing right now. So it's like a final editing process or something like that, right?
It has not formally been accepted, but I think it's looking favorable. I submitted a 300-page draft in January, and they've got back to me, and I'm revising it. It's with Chelsea Green Publishing, if they do accept it. And Chelsea Green is nationally, if not internationally, recognized for their books about regenerative and local farming, which is something that Vermont really does occupy a unique place in. And notwithstanding those who are running down our farmers and telling us that we're all dependent on illegal immigrants in order to eat in Vermont, some of us remember the Great Depression, and some of us value that agrarian culture, which is being destroyed while everybody's recreating the world and recasting our Constitution. We're losing farms, we're losing farmers, we're losing food quality, we're losing food security, and we're losing it all to a large industrialization that is at our peril. Well, and that's what the book's about. I could describe the book if you want.
Well, so one of the
You're
things.
in charge.
No, that's okay. I want to, because if I recall correctly, as of a couple of years ago, something like 10,000 Vermont family farms had closed in the last several years because of the efforts towards the climate crisis, the so-called climate crisis. Do you know those numbers by chance? How many farms have shut down in Vermont?
That number wouldn't be accurate. So there were about 29,000 dairy farms in this state in 1929.
Okay.
By about 19, all right, so now I'm going to be guessing. So not 10,000 farms.
Okay.
But as of about 20 years ago, I think we still had maybe 1,500, 2,000. But as of just a few years ago, we were down to about 800, and then COVID hit, and we're now down to, I believe, under 600.
Oh my God.
And Horizon, but these are large dairies. So when you say family farms, meanwhile, we've had some increases in smaller farms. There are actually a lot of young people that are kind of under the radar, even of our Department of Ag. There are a lot of people that want to raise pigs and raise sheep, and there's a demand that we farmers see.
Yeah.
And we could talk about feed sales and some other things, but that's part of the dynamics. Why have farming land prices in Vermont doubled? This is unlike any prior real estate cycle, and this is why we'll get into money supply a little bit.
Yeah.
Can I tell people what the book is about?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So the book. So my background is as an attorney and also as a finance guy. I was a tax attorney, and I just studied money for years. That's what I did. Ironic. And then I studied animals for years, and I learned a lot about farming, and I was pretty shocked. And actually, after farming for about 8 years, I was pretty discouraged, because I realized just how difficult it was to even modestly raise any food to make a living. It seemed really stacked against the farmer. And that's when I discovered a writer named Wendell Berry, and he's been telling us about this for a long time. And it is a crisis. And so to bring it all, so the book, so with those twin disciplines of law, finance, and farming, I can understand food supply and why we're seeing food inflation right now, and it's going to get worse. Tucker Carlson said a few nights ago that the price of urea fertilizer had gone from $250 a ton to $865 a ton overnight. Are you thinking? Let's talk about fossil fuels. Do you know where fertilizers are made from? Fertilizers in industrial agriculture are made from natural gas. Aside from all the pollution that's there, it's not natural, it's not sustainable, and it's about to triple or quadruple in price. Now, when you add up all the layers of costs, including the diesel and fuels used to plow fields, harvest fields, spread fertilizers, spread chemicals that are all going up, your food is about to go up astronomically more than the 6% a year inflation that they're telling you. And Vermonters, of all people, should know that to sacrifice our food self-reliance for tourism and art shows is the dumbest folly that came here from Flatland ever. Okay, and that's what we're on the verge on. So when we're looking at you running for election in this November, and Molly Gray is going to run, and Molly Gray is, I'm sure, a nice person, but she is mediocre in intellect, and she does not understand these issues, and Erica does. She's supposed to be a farmer, and her big plan to go to the United States Congress is to advocate for universal daycare and universal rights for women to have abortions. It's not a problem. Nobody's being denied an abortion. This is not 1957, Molly. What are you going to do for our food supplies? Because Erica has some plans. What are you going to do for Vermont farmers? This is about food security, food quality. Vermont is the #1 locavore state in the country. We should be exporting food out of this state. Instead, we're paying people $10,000 to come here and work on a laptop. We've abandoned our culture, and Phil Scott has sold us out, but that's not what this is about. So one of the things that we're talking about in this book, though, and so the original plan was a true Green Deal, because it is a mirror back to the so-called Green New Deal, which is a fraud. And the cash for clunkers was a fraud. And the corn ethanol is a fraud. And the EV cars is a fraud. And the solar panels are a fraud. All of them are ways to pollute in new ways. So the criticism of Republicans go ahead.
Specifically pollute in new ways by offshoring the pollution to places like China and other countries where they're manufacturing it, where they're mining the rare earth minerals, where they don't have human rights laws and labor laws and other things that would protect the environment or people working on it.
And so actually that's one of the things. So this is what we would call externalized costs of production. So to use this, and by the way, I'd like to come, before we leave tonight, I would like to talk about cows and hamburger, because I can make a great comparison economically, health-wise, soil and water loss, and renewables just by comparing cows. So if you look at a renewable car, now, first of all, so what you're talking about is externalized costs. And what we've done is, and let's back up a little bit, the environmental movement.
Sorry, yes, no apology. You're not allowed to apologize. So just slow down.
Yes, I should.
Okay, so that will be my one thing. I love how passionate you are, and how I'd said before we got started, John is like a top. If you pull his string, he will just start sharing everything that he's got in the big brain he's got, which that's what I call you, a big brain person, because you just have so much knowledge. And so you get started and you start talking really fast.
Go all over the place.
So we just want to make sure people,
all right,
you're going slow enough that we can understand you.
and no, thank you for that, because I feel like a top. In fact, in writing the book, it became a real odyssey, and I read about 90 books to write this book, and I'm finding out some things I didn't know. The fertility rates of our young men is really plummeting. Their sperm counts are down, young women as well. And so let me come back to the big history here before we come in. Let's talk about a couple of things. Let's talk about Al Gore and Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan and this whole history of environmentalism, and where it's become so polarized, like so many things, and how it is that we could have a regenerative agricultural plan, because the original working title was True Green Deal. The title I think we're going to go with is A Regenerative Politics. So Americans came together. Rachel Carson wrote a book in about 1962 called Silent Spring, and she really warned us about the problem of DDT and other chemicals that were wiping out bald eagles and songbirds, thus the name Silent Spring. Literally finding millions of dead birds because they were spraying this stuff rampantly for all different reasons.
Oh, wow.
So as a consequence, it was actually the Nixon administration that founded the EPA and got a lot of credit as conservatives, believe it or not, founding the environmental movement.
Yeah.
And it was all about chemicals, all right? And then this moron, Al Gore, came along. Let's just talk about this, because Al Gore and the liberals decided to politicize the environment with the whole inconvenient truth. Well, here's the inconvenient reality. Whether or not we're heating the planet with carbon dioxide, because the whole debate no longer became about chemicals, it became about CO2. So now we're in this intractable situation. If we all agreed to stop chemical pollution, we would reduce the amount of fossil fuels we would use. We would also thereby reduce the CO2 without anybody having to fight about it. And nowhere is that more apparent than in agriculture. And nowhere is that more apparent than in the difference between confinement operations, where you raise cows in a box, giving them industrially inputted grains, versus rotationally or grass-fed. And that gets back to this idea of externalized costs. So let's, as conservatives, what if we all, conservatives and liberals, stop fighting over sequestered carbon and just fought over chemicals? And by the way, looking at this politically, the liberals are well ahead of us on the understanding that regenerative agriculture, which I'm using, this isn't organics, all right? This is, so an organic hamburger that comes from Germany might cost you a lot more in fossil fuels if it comes in a jet. You have to look at the total cost, and you hit on this. So these are externalized costs. So first of all, let's just forget about carbon dioxide. We don't have to fight about global warming anymore. We're going to all agree that we want to use fewer fossil fuels in the production of our food, because that's going to be cheaper, it's going to be more affordable. And by the way, there are other components of agriculture that are really important. Soil erosion and water loss. We are depleting our aquifers. Okay, this is all industrial food. The thing that restores soil and water are cows. So don't listen to AOC about cow farts. The cows in a confinement facility that you've taken out of their natural structure and turned them into an industrial mechanism to then follow all cows for that is really wrong, because my cows that walk freely and rotational graze have very, very few inputs, and they don't pollute, okay?
Now, I remember you telling Benjamin and I, when we visited your farm, that there was actually a real method to to running the land there. So it was like, and I'm going to get this wrong, but it was something like you have the cows go through first because they have something in their poop and that it does something. And then the sheep go on that section because they get something out of the cow poop. And then it's like there's a whole cycle.
And then the chickens.
Yeah.
So you're getting it. So this is part of the fascination for us as farmers, and maybe a little bit beyond the book, but what you're referring to is rotational grazing. Not only do we rotate cows in a high intensive or what's called mob grazing, and it increased tilth, and it's really about microbes. So we're finally learning about our microbiomes. And the soil itself is a microbiome. And if you take healthy soil, like a nice Vermont pasture, in the top 4 inches of soil in an acre of land is something like 8 tons of living microorganisms. All right. So what you're doing, and what you're referring to, by the way, is I'm managing microorganisms. My cows go through. I don't want my cows getting worms that kill cows, right?
Right.
So when I then send my sheep through, when the grass has grown up, my sheep are going to eat the parasites that the cows left behind, and they're not going to be a problem for my sheep, right?
Okay.
My cows will eat parasites that might have hurt sheep, but aren't going to hurt cows. And my chickens are not only going to kill more parrots, they're going to tear up those cow plops, so I don't have to drag the fields. I mean, Joel, Sal, and others. So one of the things we're talking about with regenerative agriculture, so this is a great example, is something called no-till agriculture. So we put 91.7 million acres to corn 2 years ago, losing an average of maybe around 5 tons of topsoil per acre per year. Okay, 450 million tons of topsoil a year on average, just from corn. We didn't count soybeans or wheat, all right? And now you're spraying all those fields with glyphosate and other chemicals because all of our corn is monocultures, highly subsidized, totally depleting the soils. So now all that living microbiome over decades of this chemicals, and glyphosate everybody loves, patented secret chemicals, you're starting to deplete the living organisms. And what you have is a substrate. And we have this reductionist idea in our life that, oh, well, you take some dirt and you put in some water. That's not how it works. And we farmers understand manure is cow poop is the only replacement for the artificial fertilizers that we've become dependent on.
What?
And those are limited. Phosphate, 80% of the world's phosphate, I believe it is, some large amount, is in, okay, I forget what country, a foreign country.
Yeah.
We don't have it. We don't even have it. So this actually was a crisis about 100 years ago when the world started running out of bat guano. Okay, you can research this.
I did not know
about 100 years ago, and then they developed synthetic fertilizer out of fossil fuels. And the only thing that you can replace fossil fuels with for fertilizer is poop, all right, or composted plant matter.
Okay.
Now, similarly, though, we have a problem with fossil fuels. You're not replacing fossil fuels with solar energy because all of your technologies for that energy are made out of fossil fuels. And another way to look at this, so we can look at renewables, quote unquote, it's a falsehood. It's a perpetual motion boondoggle. Okay. You have current energy and stored energy. When my cows eat grass, each blade of grass is a solar panel. Okay. And so this is called current. We call this current energy. If I'm collecting this year's energy, this is all this great big field, this pasture is literally a big organic solar panel, not made in China. All right. Now, if I want to use solar panels, then I'm using stored energy. And first of all, as you've hit upon, what are the input costs? So let's get back to your question now that we're looking at the externalized costs. If you take a solar panel manufactured in China, and there are several different kinds of technologies and different solar panels used, but they all pollute, some of them really horribly. Now, we haven't got into the other externalized costs, which is child labor, horrible labor, cancer in people, all right? But these are extractive industries that mine. And something else we don't hear about is that in America, well, we don't want an EV car that's like a Chinese EV car, which is very basic, all right? Like with a Hyundai or something. No, we want that backup camera. We want all those little flags. We want it to stop for us automatically. If we take our hands off the wheel, it screams at us. And all of those inputs have chemical costs. And then we go, oh, look, let's compare this car after it's been manufactured out the door. Let's compare this solar panel after it's been manufactured, arrives in Vermont, and compare its life over a 20-year period and say, look, it used less CO2 but you have excluded from your calculation in a fraudulent way all of the horrible short-term release of chemicals. Moreover, how do you make solar panels? You use quartz and coal. Quartz and coal. That's how you do it. You're accelerating. Look, cash for clunkers. We were going to save it. What did you do? You gave incentives to rich people to buy brand new cars. Those few inner city people who could afford Clash of Clans probably shouldn't have incurred the debt. Okay.
Yeah.
All those cars, a lot of people that could afford were good working cars, but they banned you from reselling the component parts. They accelerated brand new car sales. The real question is this: Republicans say burn, baby, burn. Okay, bad. Not good, all right? I'm not defending that, okay? And that's something that we have to fix. And something my book's about is having an environmental policy that Republicans can get behind and really believe in, which is helping small local farms.
Yeah.
Burn, baby, burn is wrong.
It is.
But what the Democrats are doing is burn, baby, with virtue, with signaling wrong, okay?
Well,
they're burn, baby, burn, because when you're using solar panels, you are just still consuming. You're actually polluting faster, just like cash for clunkers. When you go use corn ethanol, you're depleting soils, depleting water, and jumping up food prices. What is the common theme? Every time it helps large corporate interests that see an opportunity, like with GMO labeling and organics, to compromise it and make a profit off of you.
Yep.
Okay.
Well,
and most of the organic food cannot be relied upon to be because they sell you out.
Yes.
The only one you can really trust is your local politician, like Erica Reddick
and
for United States
John
House.
Klar.
I'll be running for Senate, by the way,
Orange
in Orange
County Senate. Okay, so I want to just check some of our comments and questions.
Sorry, I've thrown a lot there. She said I'm a top.
Yeah, no, it's good. That's what. So we just want to pause. I know. Well, there's so much good information.
All right, you direct.
And when it's hard when you don't get the opportunity to talk to people the same way that you do if you are on the other side of the political aisle. So it's almost like there's so much good information. We have to try to get all of it in at one time so people can hear it.
Well, and it's also interconnected. And the root of this is what I'm saying is small family farms.
Yeah.
That's the answer, not a big Green Deal. Because the big Green Deal, they're about to tell you we have a food crisis, so we have to give all the money to the big corporations because the only way we can feed you is to keep subsidizing them with their chemical production. If you read my book and you study it, you will find out it is horrifying what is happening to our soils and water. In fact, fracking,
hold on,
we're dumping that water back into our aquifers.
Yes, there is so much.
It's really,
there's so much. Okay,
and
so
we're giving ourselves cancer.
Oh my God, we could go on and on. I was literally just having that conversation.
There's a chapter on human health in the book.
Oh, good. Because
local is again,
I got into a whole conversation with somebody the other day about, you can say that, global warming is bad or, whatever, fine. But can we not talk about the fact that the FDA and the CDC and organizations like that have sold us down the river when they're approving all of these drugs that supposedly fix one problem that you have, but actually give you cancers and all of this other stuff. Mm-hmm. We know that it's a corrupt system because we watch the leadership from, we're like, oh, I'm the director of the CDC, or I'm the director of the FDA, or I'm a politician, I'm a senator, and I help get this subsidy passed.
How about the USDA?
And the USDA, exactly.
That's who we're talking.
This is what that directly related to our topic of conversation.
And the FDA.
And they then go on to have these multi-million-dollar contracts with, Monsanto.
Tom Vilsack, you're talking about. And others. And actually, it goes back decades. Here's the truth, Vermonters. Food production is very profitable. And the biggest lie for decades has been that we need to go bigger or get out. You need to let the industrialists take over. We've destroyed our health. We've destroyed the system of our small farms. We've destroyed our communities. This is what Wendell Berry is about. This is what Wendell Berry wrote about in The Unsettling of America, I think 1969. Mm-hmm. Long-Legged House was 1969. Yeah. So I didn't invent any of this stuff. In fact, my book borrows from Wendell Berry, Aldo Leopold, Joel Salatin, Rachel Carlson, John Muir, many of the great environmentalists. And why aren't we listening to their voices? Why are we listening to AOC, who clearly does not even know which end of the cow to burp out of? And they want to ban cows. I have an article coming out about vat meat. They want to have us all, literally, Bill Gates says that we can eliminate all cows on the planet. This supposedly to benefit cows. How will you grow the vegetables that you're going to turn into vat meat? Are they going to make vat meat out of soy, which is full of chemicals, which is totally dependent on all these chemicals, which is totally fossil fuels, which is destroying the soil, destroying the water. That's what lack of sustainability means. And there's one other component that we should talk about in case we run out of time, which is the economic problem of hyperinflation.
Okay, so hold on to that. Mm-hmm. We're going to come to that. So I want to get to a couple of these comments. Oh my God, there's so much.
I'm good now. I've already told you everything.
And now I was just going to ask a question. Shoot. I just think it's fascinating that people with no experience farming or doing any of those kinds of things think that they know better than the people who have been doing it for years, as if because Bill Gates
founded Microsoft,
he somehow knows better than the people who have been feeding America,
He's a
their
fantasist.
families.
Yes, he's not educated in what he's talking about.
Yeah, it's very, when you're a farmer,
but he has huge influence. So it's very irresponsible. But anyway, sorry.
Well,
go ahead, yeah.
no, but that's, every farmer is basically a chemist, an animal husbandrist. I don't know, that's not a word, but
A
they do
meteorologist.
they do animal husbandry. They
mentally ill.
They're
poor.
Well, maybe all of those things too, but there's so much that goes into running a farm, no matter if it's just plants or with animals or whatever. And so to demean people who have a history of working hard and being resilient and feeding this country, that they would be demeaned in favor of somebody like a Bill Gates, is very strange to me.
Well, so that's we're off veering a little away, but actually there's a chapter in the book called A Christian Ethic, and it questions whether or not one's a Christian about how it is you can denigrate the creation and give your kids cancer, and then you're going to say God's going to take care of you. But so you're hitting on this, the moral issues. So this is actually a longstanding theme, and it's really the country mouse versus the city mouse. It really goes back as long as humanity, since we stopped being hunter-gatherers. It goes back to the Roman Empire. And, we don't have full clarity, but a lot of people would say that the Roman Empire fell in part because the rich elitist boneheads in the legislature, the Senate, just took all their food for granted. Okay. Nobody knows just how many billions of dollars are involved in the profitability of food, like Monsanto Corporation, the chemical giant, that developed Agent Orange and now wants to hold the patents to all your corn, so you can't even buy corn without their say so. Even the farmers having to say, U.S. versus Bowman, right? They're patenting it. So the moral question here is, we as a society, no society in human history has ever been this connected from their farmers and their food supply than this one. And of all people in history that are still around, maybe Vermonters would get that, because a lot of Vermonters remember the Great Depression. And my family and many others, it formed me and formed many others, those who lived it. So what do we have now? People in power. This is an old theme. You always have the elitists running things, okay? Yeah. And it's by definition because farmers don't want to go run things. Now, we start as a nation of farmers.
They're also busy.
Jeffersonian farmers, all right? So this is also distributism. This is some great, so what do you have right now? I call it in the book the Scylla and Charybdis. Do you know that famous? So in Greek mythology, I think it might have been Odysseus has to pass through this channel, and on one side are cliffs, and on the other side is a whirlpool, and then there are sirens like calling to you to try to get you to go. Yeah. So what we look at right now, we're being told, well, capitalism is the horror because it creates wealth disparity, and communism is the horror because both of those are our enemy. Okay, both of those extremes, and unregulated capitalist extremism, both capitalism extremism is Monsanto. Okay, and capitalism extremism is Pfizer, right, and others who paid the biggest criminal fine in history, and now we're being mandated to take their drug,
which is crazy.
Okay, so that's insane, and so I'm going to run on that. But you can't have it both ways, Republicans. Many Republicans, many conservatives, or both. Do we want to protect corporate interests at the expense of human health? No. Whether it's in telecommunications and 5G technology, whether it's in no responsibility for the consequences of an experimental vaccine that you're mandating us take, whether it's fracking and pumping stuff into the ground. I mean, the list goes on. So you choose one or the other. And I think we've gone way too far. So the common theme going back here that you've mentioned again is we have corporate profit makers like Tom Vilsack from Monsanto in the USDA, and it's a revolving door. The same thing is happening in the Securities and Exchange Commission. Same thing's happening with Hunter Biden peddling influence in Ukraine. All right. So at what point do we go, oh, look, the sheiks are spending millions of dollars to go, influence? It's time. The corruption is destroying us. Yeah. And no, you don't get chocolate milk from a brown cow. And I mention that deliberately because that's what I'm talking about. You become disconnected from your food supply at your peril. And I think a lot of people in New York City and others with COVID are going, oh, empty shelves. Never thought that could happen. Taking it for granted. Vermonters stored a month's worth of food, okay? And they still should. Yeah. Because that's what my grandmother and others learned. Don't trust the banks. Don't trust the government. They proved they can't be trusted. So the one thing you can trust is what you grow out of your current sunlight. But it's a win-win.
Oh,
That's the beauty.
That.
Everything we're talking about doing, everybody should agree with, except corporate interests. And one of the things my book proposes is getting rid of the huge multi-billion-dollar subsidies of these monocultures. And I can tell you right now, that makes me public enemy number one.
Yep.
Whether I'm a Republican or a Democrat doesn't matter. We need to stop subsidizing corn. We need to stop subsidizing ethanol.
Stop subsidizing large corporate interests.
And by the way, the other flip side is we then subsidize the food production companies that turn this high fructose corn syrup toxin and other things that anytime they could take hydrogenated fat that was a waste product and turn it into something to stick in a cookie for you to feed your children, that's what they do.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're also then subsidizing the production of fake foods, bad foods, fattening foods, diabetes causing foods, family destroying foods that now in Vermont, they want to make universally available for everybody. They're not even healthy. At least if you're going to feed people in the name of their poverty, give them healthy food.
Oh, I love it.
And stop blaming it on white supremacy that you've now subsidized corn and made it cheap and unhealthy and made it so that you literally subsidize the bad food and you don't subsidize the healthy food. And then you blame it on the farmers and you blame it on, it's corporations doing this always, both ends, every end, maximize profit. Yep. And if they could sell you Kool-Aid stuff with cyanide and you drop dead and they could still make money selling your corpse, they would do it. They will kill the host. They're doing it.
I know. No, I'm just thinking
Soylent Green.
How I can't wait to cut this video up later into bite-sized pieces because you're getting so many good one-liners and stuff. This is such good information. It's okay. So hold on.
Guess what we talked about? It's the truth. Everybody can hear what I'm saying is true.
Yes.
And we really want to reach people on the left. I don't want anybody, no matter how far extreme on the left, to starve to death. I don't want them to have to eat crappy food. And we have to get together as humans on that level because there are those who are out trying to divide us on race and wealth and everything else while they profit.
Yes.
Watch the birdie. Watch where the profits are. Watch your
the money.
Food supply. Yep. Henry Kissinger said, control the oil, control the nations, control the food, control the people. They're out to control the food. And you're going to see hyperinflation now, even if Ukraine goes away, because they printed $10 trillion of money to just give to people. This is called inflation. And when you look at those layered costs of fuel, you're going to see $20 a pound hamburger. And that's why I'd like to talk about, do we still have time?
No, well, we're doing great on time. Yeah, I haven't gotten to any of the questions or comments or anything yet. So if you guys are watching, feel free to write questions in the comments, whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch. I'll see your questions in your chat. Sean says, Molly Gray is not a farmer. Her family is, but she left, went to school, then came back, and shouldn't have. It's a waste of money. She hasn't enough experience in the real world to represent the working class. And I think that that's a really good point, is that what I think most Americans are feeling right now is those of us in the middle, right? The working class, we're not super wealthy necessarily. We're not super poor necessarily. All of us in the middle just sort of feel left out of all of these conversations. It's like there's no real sense or understanding of how the decisions being made by the corporate managerial class, they don't understand the consequences of the decisions and how it's trickling down, for lack of a better word, or on purpose to draw a comparison. They don't understand how those policies trickle down to things like our food supply.
Well, and that's why I think this is an opportunity for conservatives, especially you. Let me use my hamburger example. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Because I'll use it back to Molly Gray.
I love hamburgers.
I'll show you why. So let's see if you or Molly Gray knows better about hamburgers. Let's take 2 pounds of hamburgers. I worked on this for your interview today. I was thinking about how to try to convey to people. We talk about petrodollars. I'm going to try to talk about something because you have a finance background.
Yeah.
And because you can spin circles around Molly Gray in debates about this later because she doesn't understand it. Yes, she grew up on a farm, supposedly.
Yeah.
That I don't want to attack Molly Gray. I want to ask Molly Gray, when you voters get to November, what are her issues and what are Erica's? We're told it's about being a woman. So apparently we now at least see, can we just talk about the issues? And when we talk about the issues, let's talk about 2 pounds of hamburger and petrodollars. So we've heard of the petrodollar. We've heard this. What does that mean, that the dollar is linked to petroleum? There is an artificiality in our economy that's been going on for 100 years, and it's now going to really take off. And it's a disconnect between the real economy and the fiat currency fake economy. And so now let's talk about, so what we've done is, and the Transportation Climate Initiative, a Rockefeller Corporation and family initiative to push us all into cities to save the planet.
Real?
Oh yeah, Rockefeller, go look it up on the TCI.
Okay.
That the liberals are pushing here in the Global Warming Solutions Act are all designed to push rural people like us into cities so that rich people can come here like Martha's Vineyard, apparently. They don't put restrictions on ski resorts, just me driving my pickup while I try to go get some more gas for my, no, really, it's horribly, horribly inequitable. Okay. It is not equitable.
Yeah.
But let's look at the burger. So everything's about to change. Let's call it, I came up with the name petro bushels. All right. Let's look at how much fuel it takes to make a pound of wheat.
Okay.
Right? Because remember now, we got 2 pounds of burger. 1 pound of burger is grass-fed, rotational grazed. All right, that means
like
we rotate it like mine. Okay? And it's fed no grain its whole life, and the other is grain-fed. Now, aside from the differences
like the
in health,
farms, right? Like
right now, grain-fed meat, CAFOs, confinement animal feed operations. The animals spend their entire life in a box.
Okay.
Their manure becomes waste that needs to go somewhere instead of you have to spread it mechanically as opposed to letting them plop it around and etc. And all of those inputs become fossil fuel dependent. So all of that grain and soy or other feed, because there are different things. And by the way, they also use in this industry, they use a lot of grains that are left over from like distilleries and other food processing things. So no, but that's a good use of recycled grain.
Oh, okay.
But the main input
I'm like, are
is
they
we're
getting
see in
cows
prices,
drunk? That's what I heard you just say.
The leftover fermented grains and hops and things,
They're like,
they make good feed. And
Mary's going to be walking around the farm.
We don't want them in our
tipsy.
landfills. Yeah. Probably, I think one study said 40% of what's in our landfills is food, of the methane being released from our land. We waste about 40% of our food. We throw it away, and because it's cheap. And no society in history has had such cheap food as a percentage of our budgets. And now, it's like 10% of our income. If you looked historically, nobody ever paid $2 for a gallon of milk. If you looked in real terms 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, as a percentage of income from, and now we're seeing it again, by the way.
Yeah.
You're all seeing it in your grocery stores while you're told that inflation's only 6%. Talk to anybody. If you buy your own food, you know, okay?
Yeah.
25, 40%. One cheese I buy is up 30%. So I buy cheap.
Cheap cheese.
Well, I eat a lot of cheese. So I mean,
but anyway, back
burgers.
up. Yes. Yeah. So we got the burgers. One is roaming. One's
let's look at the amount of stored energy. So now, granted, if I were to use a pound of grass-fed burger for, let's say, down south, because I have to put up 200 days worth of feed for the winter, and that means there are fossil fuel inputs. Somebody has to mow that hay. Yeah. Now, if I'm in Florida, I can almost pasture year round. So if I use that pound of meat, I have almost no fossil fuel inputs in that pound of grain, in that pound of beef that's grass-fed. Now, suddenly that grass-fed beef that's so much more expensive than the traditional grain-fed beef. Why is that? It's all going to reverse. It's all going to be more expensive to live in the city because all your food comes in the city, just like Rome. It all has to come through fossil fuels. It all gets trucked into the cities. Then you truck all your crap out to Coventry, Vermont, and dump it and make a landfill. You're using fossil fuels to sustain an urban lifestyle that is not sustainable. And everything's about to get much, much more expensive, and food most of all. So if you're living in Vermont and you start raising your own food, let alone start selling it, all of a sudden it's profitable. And Monsanto's going, wait a minute, they're making money. That's why there's been a movement. That's why I fought they tried to ban on-farm slaughtering in Vermont about 5 years ago.
What?
That was a federal initiative.
Why?
They were banning it because they said health and safety. And I said, well, who's ever got sick off of one of my beef? People get sick off industrial beef, off the E. coli, in facilities that have to, when you eat a McDonald's burger, you're eating the body parts of 1,000 cows. When you eat one of my burgers, you can name him. If you want to name him, people say, what's his name? I make one up. Farmers are, his name's Fred, but people want that.
Yeah.
And that ultimately is the further you get away from your food, the less you can trust it for health, for reliability, or for the workers and how they're treated and everything else. And now we have more and more food that's imported from China and other places. It's not labeled. It's labeled as U.S. produced grass-fed meat when it's neither. It's not U.S. meat and it's not grass-fed. And there's no way to know.
And it's processed in a place where they don't have
horrible animal treatment.
Horrible animal treatment. They have no human rights laws. They're using
probably the
slave
highest
labor.
rates of injury in the country. In this country, is in meatpacking facilities.
Oh, really? So imagine doing that in a place where there's no employment laws,
hundreds
or
of cows an hour. It's absolutely all about profit. By the way, this is all really integrated in the last 20 years. All of the meat industry. That's why your foods got cheaper and cheaper, even though other inflation. So there is a lurking iceberg of economic disaster coming for Vermonters. And so what I'm saying is, for all of us, Vermont can lead the nation in this. Vermont can lead the nation in regenerative agriculture. We still have farmland we can reclaim, right? Not put solar panels on it. We can support our small local farmers. How are our local young people going to afford a farm or a property now? Everything's doubled. It's never looked so bad.
Yeah. Well,
but we have a business opportunity that Vermont always had, and it's in our farming and our culture, which is agriculture. It's profitable. It always was, and it's meaningful, and it's healthy, and it's local, and it's reliable. Because when the what hits the fan, you want to get spam from China?
Yes.
Or do you want to get...
That sounds awesome.
And we've lost all of that foundation. So as a matter of urgency, we should be funding and helping and giving incentives. Instead of corn production in Iowa that's destroying the planet, we could be giving tax incentives to young people and old people alike. But a lot of people want to farm, and it has been made artificially impossible.
We
need to get rid of those artificial...
GWSA,
well, no, even before that, it's very... But the book talks about it. But there are a lot of reasons. We value residential land and commercial development and profit more than our farmers. And that's why we're different from Europe. And now everybody's going, it's a crisis, so we have to have a Green New Deal, and we have to go bigger yet. The Green New Deal is taking the entire agricultural system and putting it in one big federal centrality. And by the way, you mentioned the USDA, and after 9/11, most people don't know, but the USDA is now under the Department of Homeland Security.
What?
Go look it up.
Why?
Because they control the food. Why do they want to microchip my cows? Why is it a federal law to microchip all of my cows and sheep? They're coming sooner or later. It's already passed. Go look it up. Why? Because they want to know where the food is. They want to microchip it. They want to track the money. They want to track the money.
That sounds very not good. So hold on.
Everything that's happening is not good.
I want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier, and forgive me if I missed it. So I want to make sure this doesn't get missed. Why is it that a pound of beef that is pasture raised without having to buy grains and all these other things, these other inputs that you talked about, if factory meat creates, it costs more because of these additional inputs and stuff like that, why does it cost more? Like, what is the difference?
Well, that's what's going to change. And so there are several reasons. So first of all, grass-fed meat is going to take me probably 2 years to finish a beef instead of 18 months. So I have 6 months longer to feed the animal to get it up to the same size.
Okay.
My input, so again, here I'm in Vermont, I mean, it depends, but generally speaking, it's really hard to compete with grain-fed, because grain has been artificially subsidized to be really cheap. And now, unless the Biden administration is going to say, oh, look, fertilizer costs are going up, we need to subsidize corn some more and help Monsanto. So if you study this, what you're going to find out, Erica, if I may call you Erica.
Yeah, you may.
Is that what we're really doing is subsidizing the chemical companies and Monsanto, and the large farmers that are in the middle are really flow-through entities. They're not making money. You subsidize their corn so that they can afford more of the chemical inputs, more of the GMO seeds, because GMOs, everybody understand that the seeds are literally designed to be dependent on the chemical applications. So do you know this about GMOs?
I did not know that. So
genetically modified seeds, so GMO corn, there are a lot of different varieties, but the chief kind is designed. It's really a spectacular technology. But to put total blind faith in it might make us forget about DDT and hydrofluorocarbons and thalidomide, But so the idea is that you can spray this corn once it's come up, and it has been genetically modified to be resistant to Roundup. And Roundup actually ultimately is not a typical chemical or herbicide, and it impacts the growth hormones of the plants. So all the weeds are killed, and the corn keeps growing because it's Roundup resistant. It's literally the only plant in the field that's resistant to the poison, okay? Now, after 5 or 10 years, you develop something called super weeds. And now they're not working anymore. We also have super bugs. So we also have all these other chemicals we use that are great. They kill bugs. But now we're killing bees, neonicotinoids and other chemicals. And probably it's concoction. Let me share with you that there are now more than 80,000 man-made chemicals. And the FDA allows those chemicals to be used in your food supply as long as they haven't been proved to be harmful. So it's not, you have to do tests to prove that it's safe for humans. It's go ahead and feed it to them. I mean, aspartame began as an ant poison. Glyphosate was developed as an industrial solvent. Yeah, aspartame was developed as an ant poison. Look it up. So they find, but this, I was a chemical engineer. This is what I studied for before I went to law school. It's a fascinating area. But if you're creating 4,000 or 5,000 new chemicals a year, this is big industry. And then they get, PFOAs. You heard of PFOAs?
That
right?
Sounds familiar.
It's the stuff leaking in the groundwater here in Vermont when you're building stuff in your frying pans. So it's, oh, what a great chemical. And then before you figure out if it's good, you release it in the environment. And this is what Rachel Carson told us about in 1962. Many of these chemicals are endocrine disruptors. That means they impact the hormone balance in your liver. Right? We have some transgender issues. Maybe it's that. We have some fertility problems in men and women. Maybe it's that. Because a lot of these chemicals are endocrine disruptors. And what Rachel Carson, just to finish this thought, a chemist is, I'm giving you a chemical. It's maybe bad, right?
Yeah.
What about when I give you 20 chemicals at once? And all of a sudden we have so many ramifications of the complex human body that we're doing to our children in their food supplies, because you have more chemicals that are there to keep the food longer on the shelves.
Right.
It's picked weeks earlier to,
and
to
then
ship.
Sprayed so that it ripens on the way.
And they don't tell you. And then you have hormones in the animals, and you have 70% of the antibiotics in this country are used in the animals to keep them alive in CAFOs. I don't use any antibiotics in my animals because I don't have to, because they live in balance with nature. And as soon as you start breaking the rules for profit, you start sacrificing human and animal health.
Wow.
So our government is not in the business of maximizing human health. It's in the business of helping corporations under the pretense then everybody benefits, like you.
Right. Yep. Oh, yeah. Oh.
It's a new colonialization. But
write that down.
Confessions of an Economic Hitman. You haven't read it? John Piper. He lives in New Hampshire. This is how we began. We moved. We don't need to invade and colonize countries anymore. We can just use international banks to loan them money at high interest rates that they can't afford to repay, and tell them to let Halliburton and all our companies come in and build their infrastructure. That's what we did in Ukraine. And part of that is, hey, why don't you build some of these bioweapons facilities for us, because they're not popular at home.
Oh, you mean the ones that supposedly don't exist? That what's her name admitted they existed in a congressional hearing? Oh my God, what is her name?
And Wuhan is where COVID was developed and gain of function research. It's kind of like DNA evidence. It's pretty obvious.
So I want to.
But I digress.
I want to go back to what you said about a lot of these chemicals being endocrine disruptors, because I know for myself, I have an autoimmune issue,
an autoimmune thyroid issue. It's attacking
my thyroid. And I know a ton of people now who have thyroid issues, who have autoimmune issues, who have, right? Like there's so many of them, whether it's, Hashimoto's or fibromyalgia, my understanding is also an autoimmune thing. There's all of these autoimmune issues that are rampant in this country now. You have diabetes, which is another hormone issue, an autoimmune issue. And so like the more I'm listening to you talk, the more I'm thinking about all this stuff that I've heard about the medical issues that Americans are suffering with. And it's hard not to make a connection
to
how think about that they're connected.
Obesity and diabetes, and talked about high fructose corn syrup, and also seed oils. Remember how seed oils are going to be great for you. They're not good for you. You know what's good for you? Eggs and bacon. Okay? No.
I know, food.
Yesterday I ate 9 eggs, okay? Because I didn't want to wake Jack up for lunch. So I had eggs again for lunch because I could make them quiet. And bacon. And I'm 60 years old and I'm not on any heart meds at all. I'm 58. I just look 60. I think exercise helps too, but we want a pill to replace everything. And there are chemicals in all the pills.
Yeah.
And of course, however well-intentioned, look at the whole Oxycontin thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and yes, I have fibromyalgia. And once I got it, I became extraordinarily sensitized to diet soda and aspartame. I can tell you if it's in it. It's one sip, because it will immediately inflame my inflammation of my body and pain.
Yeah.
So why is
I'm
that?
allergic to meat now, which, I can't consume meat.
Any kind.
Nope. I can.
Well, that's a chat we'll have off air, perhaps. But because I don't know that one.
No,
but
but
the
that's
point is
what
this,
like weird crap is wrong with our bodies.
Let me share with your viewers. So there's a great book called Beyond Labels by Joel Salatin and Dr. Sina McCullough, which really helps you understand, what are the things. So part of why we end up eating crap is money, stress, and it's too complex to know what to eat. So there is like a list of the 10 goods and the 15 bads. Look it up. What are the 10? So certain foods you should not eat unless they're organic, like potatoes. They're
for real?
Like potatoes. Don't eat them unless they're organic. They're going to absorb everything. But you eat a banana or you eat an avocado, or you eat some of these other foods, they have skins on them, that particular industry. So if you're going to eat a vegetable or an item that's not organic, then maybe an organic
one that's
so just get educated. But that's a good resource, and you don't want to give it to your kids. Part of the reason I wrote this book is Joel Salatin, who's a libertarian, and I talk about this. A lot of conservatives eat crap food. Okay, they eat at Chick-fil-A. And they're like, oh, burn, baby, burn. I can eat whatever I want. And I can sip glyphosate. And, oh, that's all baloney, that organic stuff. That organic stuff is not necessarily about the quality of the food, though it is. It's about not just depleting our ecosystem by putting out 450 million tons of dirt. You wonder why the oceans are rising. Maybe it's because we put 450 million tons of soil a year in them. So get educated, because you don't want to give your kids cancer. You don't want to give your kids sterility. You don't want to trust corporate America with your children's eating decisions and what they're doing in our schools with critical race theory and transgenderism, but also with their diets. They're destroying the family and having it being replaced by an industrial, institutional, profit-making enterprise. And every time they're selling you a bill of goods of how good it is for you. And it's not. Get out and work and exercise and grow some vegetables. You'll all be happier.
I remember back in college, so God, this was over 20 years ago at this point, watching movies or documentaries like Food Inc., where they explained a lot of this stuff. And I learned back then, we were talking about the evils of Monsanto and things like that. What do you think has to happen for when, you might say the left or liberals, right? Like, this was what I was raised was bad and it was a problem and we don't want this. We want natural and organic, and the pharmaceutical companies are bad. They're interested in profit and corporate. Like, how do we move from an understanding that this is not good for us to this new thing where all of a sudden we trust Pfizer and Moderna and all of these companies? Like, we used to know that they were terrible and that they did messed up stuff and that they didn't care about people. We used to know Monsanto was suing farmers if somehow one of their seeds ended up pollinating a farmer's seed, in an adjacent lot. We used to know these things, and now we've abandoned reason in favor of these same companies that we used to know were shisty.
Well, and I think that's where we need to start unifying. When did Nike become the arbiter of race?
Oh my God!
When Nike with its sweatshops.
Do you remember? I remember when I was younger. I didn't own Nikes because they had slave labor.
And now I don't own them because they're going to try to racialize us. Corporations themselves are preying on these race and other things to keep us what? I call it watch the birdie. All right, they keep us distracted. In answer to your question, I think the answer is Icarus. I'm using mythology again. Do you know Icarus? Icarus had wings of wax and flew too close to the sun. I found out there's actually a word called Icarian. I went to use it in an article and I looked it up, and I didn't make it up. It's Icarian because you fly so close to the sun that you burn and you fall to the earth. To paraphrase Wendell Berry, he said, our only hope is in our collapse. And the reason, and I've actually been writing about this, if you go back in my articles in Newport Daily Express, I probably wrote my first article about the coming greatest depression, right? Because the potential for this to kill humans is huge. Our food supplies are so vulnerable like never before. And maybe the price of gas right now is about to expose this so that we can do something before it does become that calamity. Yeah. And we tend to be a species that doesn't really react and get off the couch unless we have to, whatever the crisis. So
it's got to be bad.
Question, but what I'm saying is it's now. It's now. And we as conservatives should get ahead on this, but I don't care who does. Yeah. All I can tell you is a lot of people on the left are trying to politicize this for, it's about food. It's about good quality food and that basic idea of the communities and the people and the knowledge and the humility that comes from growing food. Especially in Vermont, it's really hard. But you're not going to reclaim all your farmland in Massachusetts and in Connecticut and in New York City. Right? Vermont always was a place that sold food to those cities. We can be again, and we can provide jobs for our young people. And it can become, it can create tax revenues without having to be subsidized. We're on the verge of that.
One of the things I've found so interesting is that it's like, if you're a conservative, right, small c conservative, so Republican, libertarian, you know, small, like I call myself a small government conservative, it's almost like we haven't wanted to admit that there's a problem with the environment or that there's things to address. Because if we do, then it's like we're conceding ground to our opposition or something like that. Like, why do you think that there's some conservatives, and I'm asking you to speculate, why do you think there's so many conservatives who don't want to have these conversations or act like it's fine?
That's a good question. And so interestingly, there are some national outfits that I write for that would not publish certain of my articles. So for instance, one of the primary things that I argue is that the way to save the planet, whether or not it is warming, is to reduce our consumption. Okay. And that's a very unpopular thing to say, because let me tell you what, well, think about it. Americans, I hate to break this to you, Vermonters, but both the left and the right in Congress are pandering to large corporate interests. I hate to shock you with that.
I know.
Now, so here's the question for conservatives. So, the 2020 platform for the Republican Party nationally replicated the 2016 platform because of COVID. And in that platform, it is an utterly indefensible, horrible environmental policy of, gee, don't we love fracking and haven't they saved our lives? I think there's a certain amount of conservatism on the environment that reacted in opposition to the over-regulatory direction of the, not really the left, because here's the problem with government. Government throughout history only grows bigger.
Yes.
So when you create the EPA and you create, however well-intentioned, then kind of like right now with, you know, in Vermont with so many new departments, and you got to justify your existence. So now you got to hire some more people. And, you know, if you're a hammer, you got to find a nail. So I think that some of it developed rationally by a conservative resistance to overregulation, and then became, I think, irrationally too much of a deregulation, especially in view of some of the things we're talking about, the technological and other advances, artificial intelligence. Okay. These are things that need to be restrained, not embraced, you know,
whole cloth.
And so right now conservatives have a problem. And that is that they have to stop, they have to have a policy. And being anti everything is not a policy. And instead of being negative, because I'd really like to be negative about the total waste of time and actual acceleration of destruction of renewable projects that benefit large corporations in China, manufacturing is the solution. More manufacturing is the solution to the environmental problem. Absolutely not true. And you cannot replace cow manure. And you cannot replace the fossil fuels. There's no other energy source. So by shoving them all into more consumption, because solar panels, we didn't even talk about, you have to dispose of them too. And the EV cars, China's in a crisis with this.
Recycled.
And rooftop solar panels here in Vermont was the 6th worst state in the country for sun days, you know, days of sun. And rooftop solar panels, I believe, are about $220 per kilowatt hour. Something they are by far the most expensive way to do it. And we're subsidizing that at the expense of poor people who are paying for it on fixed income in Vermont. Their rates are going up $60 million a year last year to subsidize rich people getting solar panels. This is not boosting the economy. This is not creating jobs. This creates jobs for people in China, where most of them are produced. Well, the whole thing is a fraud, and nothing shows it better than look comparatively at what farming would do. Here's a recent study showed that if we shifted 4% of confinement feed operations for cows to rotational grazing like me and put them back on the land, that we would sequester more carbon than the entire world produces in 1 year. In 1 year, we could eclipse it all. Now, that's just one study, but that's because when you grow soil and we bring it back from this to this, that's where the carbon is. It's actually industrial agriculture that has released the vast amounts of the carbon in the air. Whether that's a crisis or not, I seek not to go there, because what I seek to do is do what we can do and what we can agree to do.
And what
carbon isn't the boogeyman. The chemicals in the large corporations are, and they actually want to tell you that they're going to save you from the carbon problem by helping you get a new $60,000 car that you can leave for your grandchildren to dig a hole for in Coventry. When are we going to start listening to our common sense in our souls? If the Republicans want to be viable in the future, nationally or locally, then they have to start being responsive, not to corporate America, but to human health and the issues that we say matter for us. We do care about our kids. We don't want them to get cancer. We don't hate women. We're not racist. We literally have maybe some different ideas. But in this case, I can tell you, I have some very different ideas from the Green New Deal as to how to help all Americans. And most Americans could get behind this.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what I'm saying. Conservatives can get behind this if you don't pass it. Oh, we need to do this to save carbon. No, we need to do this so we're not dependent on China for food and we're not losing all of our soil. Look at the water aquifers and where we're going to be in 10 years. We are on the brink of an absolute food crisis. And meanwhile, the corporate America will say, oh, no, this is the only way to feed the world is to put the pedal to the metal. Because by the way this works is the more you destroy your soil, the more applications of fertilizers and chemicals are required to get less and less food.
It's a cycle.
It is absolute. That's what unsustainable means. And what I'm saying is it's also economically unsustainable, because if the whole system was built on cheap oil and now oil goes up fourfold, the entire system collapses economically. That's the petro bushel. That's because now all of a sudden, that's why part of the book is, all right, so maybe I'm not buying organic, but maybe I'm buying food that came from Vermont instead of Chile.
Yep.
All right. Or being more aware of where I buy it, because transporting those things, huge amounts of fossil fuels.
Absolutely.
So if I really want to be mindful and I really want to do something about the planet, instead of making you do something with your car while I go skiing.
Yep.
Okay. We're pumping snow. We're creating snow using fossil fuels out of water that we pump out of rivers in Vermont. And we're talking about all the, where is that in the global warming? Why don't you ban skiing right there? Because skiing does not produce food. Well, how about we have that discussion where we burn calories and fossil fuels for all of our flat screen TVs versus food? Food is a higher moral priority for human consumption than other uses of energy. But you don't see that distinction being made by government or policy. It's all insane and upside down. It's all about corporate profit.
And you're not seeing a push to reduce consumption.
Generally.
Heaven forbid, because the capitalist system depends on 8% growth every year forever, or it'll collapse.
Or the stock market, you'll get sued by your shareholders, or, fill in the blank. Like, people don't realize that. A lot of times they'll get mad, they put profit above everything else. Well, if you're a publicly traded company and you don't make profit for your shareholders, if they don't get interest and dividends at the end of the year, they can sue you. So
and that's somewhat changing with fair trade and some other things, as we've seen some change. But yes, you're correct. But
so I'm gonna, if I go on the stock market rant, then it'll be a whole other thing. But one of the things I talk about with my sister a lot, because she actually she studied environmental science in school, and her whole thing is, we can do all these grand gestures and none of them are going to make a difference if we don't reduce consumption.
That's correct.
And so when, you've got everybody needs their new cell phone every year, and every year Apple has to come out with a new phone and a new whatever. That's why I don't care. I have an old Samsung that is
like 6 years old and I don't care.
It works. And why would I need a device that I know is made of chemicals and parts that have to be mined from places around the world? It is ends up being a toxic waste dump item. Like, if you're just constantly just saying, screw it, throw it away, I don't care, and I'm gonna, we don't fix televisions anymore. We just throw them away and then buy a new one. And
this is where we have to wake up. There's an industry telling us that it's okay. First of all, as Ritzard Legucko talks about in his book, we're a culture globally of consumers.
Yeah.
We're being told that's your purpose in life. And then we wonder why people are miserable and they're looking for a quasi-religious political ideology to replace the fact that they have no real purpose in life. Okay? No, that's the truth.
No,
and so because consumption, Martin Luther King talked about this, what people want is the opportunity to earn a living and feel some respect and some purpose and developing something, and that they're contributing to something. And this idea that we can sit around and collect money and play video games all day long and feel satisfied. No, actually you end up anxious and depressed and miserable, and that's where we are. And then you've got to blame somebody else for it. But also, let's just think about sin. What is sin? Sin is I want to do what I want to do. So if you if you've got a culture that's telling you, hey, porn is bad, but we're going to package it in a new way, I mean, a lot of what you've just listed about these phones and things, it's just porn, okay? It's just it's being presented with the illusion that it's a good thing, and it's a bad thing. You mentioned phones. You know, I wrote an article about this. Nobody wants to talk about, you know, Greta Thunberg and the young people. They're going to rescue us. But studies show that young people are the big polluters. On average, they own 5 little devices. I have one phone that I try not to crush. I've never had a flat screen TV. I've never bought one. I've never bought a new TV. All right, I've always bought used everything. Actually, mostly I have not owned a TV. And my daughter, who speaks 5 languages, thanked me for not owning a TV. She also plays cello because she had to find stuff to do. So if, you know, the same diet with your diet is the same with what you think. Crap in, crap out. If you want to wake up from the matrix and take the red pill, then wake up. Otherwise, you're going to get cancer. Otherwise, you're going to be dependent on the government. Otherwise, you're going to get diabetes. You're going to be fat. You're going to be obese, and you're eating crap that they're making profit on while making it taste good. One of the books I wanted to bring is absolutely horrible. It's called Hooked. All right. It is about the science, horrifying, to develop your tongue receptors so they can make artificial chemicals that taste like meat. I have an article coming out about it. Those of you who read on True North Reports will see that I'm all over the place. And the reason is I love sharing this information for people. When people read my articles and you people watch this, then you're equipped, then you know it. You know where to look.
Yes.
You don't need me anymore. And this is why I became a lawyer. This is why I'm running for office. I don't care if you vote for me or not. I want you to take these policies and take them to heart and start caring about other people in food and community and agriculture and the things that Vermont can still prize that are good about itself and offer the whole country. Without regard to politicizing it, because my cows are not political, okay?
They're not?
And that hamburger, when you go to eat it, it just doesn't matter when we get down to enjoy and appreciate. This is about gratitude. And that's really part of what farming instills in us. It's difficult and it's arduous and it's no weekends. Oh, have a good weekend, scratch.
Yeah,
you know, what is that kind of, is it Friday? I forgot.
Or something like that.
Everything's a trade-off, and things that are worth having are hard. And we live in a society of complacency, and we think we can just print money and create a perfect utopia. And we're about to crash into the cliffs of reality right now. And Vermonters of all people have a duty and an understanding of these issues of food, because we're country bumpkins, because we live out here for our traditions. Vermonters aren't living here to get rich, except maybe in Chittenden. Are we in Chittenden? Most Vermonters are here for something else, just the fresh air. I get up every day. I feel like it's priceless to live in Vermont. But it ain't because of the money. It's cold out and it's beautiful.
No, but I say that even like I'm probably going to get in trouble. I think Benjamin's watching. Don't get mad, honey.
Benjamin, I really like this sweater. If you just message here that I can keep this sweater, I've already stretched it out on you anyway. I'm thinking you're kind of scrawny.
But
no offense.
But there's something
I'm kind of fat.
That is not true. There is something about the air here. Like I loved living in Texas. I love visiting Texas because of the culture. You know, I love the people there and the community
and the way that they care about each other. But
even when you're out in the country, the air does not smell the same. And there is something about being here. I'm going to get emotional. Wow. I was not expecting that. There's something.
You want to take a break?
I know. I'm like, I need a minute. Let me collect myself.
You're for clap.
But there's something about the atmosphere here, and there's something about the air here in the mountains with the lakes and the rivers and the streams. And it is like when you have to compromise with the environment to survive. Do you know what I mean? Like the environment is what it is here, and you can't control it. So when it's crappy out, when it's raining, when it's snowing, like
you roll with it.
You have to learn to be one with nature, I think, especially if you grow up in the country or you spend any time in the country. And there's something about that. There's something about the air here that just is clean and fresh.
Well, and that's true everywhere. And something I hit upon in the book, but other entire books are being written about it, are phthalates. Are you familiar with phthalates?
No.
Phthalates, because you're drinking some in both of those plastic containers.
No, don't tell me that.
So once again, okay, let's look. It looks so
okay, you're gonna have to
Orwellian.
help me pick out a water bottle because it was
So
BPA free.
Yeah, I'm still learning too because science is still learning. And now we have phthalates at the top of the Alps, and we have it in the oceans. We have billions, I mean, tons, millions. I don't know what it is. The plastics in the oceans, but phthalates are microscopic plastics. They're in our drinking water. They're in our food. They're now finding they're in the plastic bag that I just routinely would stick a piece of cheese in to throw it in the fridge.
Yeah.
And so every time we're using these plastics, we're actually absorbing more chemicals into our body that has not had time to evolve to know what to do with these things. And believe it or not, they might create free radicals. They might combine with other things and cause cancer. And all of a sudden, we've got cancer rates going through the roof in our children. Yep. And we're going, oh, I wonder what that's for here. I'm going to watch Channel 13
Why
again
are children
and watch
obese?
Yellowstone and eat some more Cheetos. Yep. Get informed or pay the price. And I can't, I hate to say that because it is so complex. And they count on that complexity. Yeah. Corporate America deliberately obfuscates. You see it happen all the time. And they try to cloud the truth to say, oh, GMO labeling. And then what did they do? The Obama administration rescued us from Vermont's state labeling laws, passed a federal labeling law that basically preempted everything. And now it's more difficult than ever. Okay, so that's how corporate America works.
All the advertising, you've got we now know the corruption behind the food pyramid that we grew up with.
All
and
incorrect,
then,
yeah.
And then all these
Dr. Sina McCullough again, and is a really good, sorry. And,
no, it's fine.
And Sally Fallon, if you're not familiar with Sally Fallon, Whole Food Traditions.
Okay.
The more it is that it's whole and natural and close to the earth, it just makes sense,
so the less processed.
The less processed. Highly processed foods are literally not food. Wendell Berry wrote probably 30 years ago, he said, if corporations could figure out a way to run a tube right from the factory to your navel, they would do it. And they just haven't figured it out yet. It's a good image, but it's true. But
you mentioning some like aspartame was meant to be an ant.
It was designed to be an ant poison.
Crisco was an industrial lubricant. And it's like one molecule away from plastic or something like that.
But it still makmakes better pie.
It makes better Christmas cookies. My grandmother's Christmas cookie recipe.
But Crisco, but there's some stuff out there. I can't. Some of the hormones they use for beef to make them grow a little faster that just do horrible things to their bodies and to the flavor. But the common theme is we don't know because we go, oh, look, plastic is the greatest thing since white bread. This is a common theme. This is Icarus again. Humanity running away with our new technologies. Every single technological advance that we come up with has cost it. We go, oh, gosh, who could have figured? Yeah. And that's true of every single technology, but that's not true of growing a cow off the dirt. When we go back to nature, we go back to those things. And not everybody can do that. But you know what? We actually could revert back over time. And this is a huge economic, cultural, community building. It's all a plus to grow our family farms again. Yeah. As Wendell Berry said, for 30 years, we've said, well, we've lamented the death of the small family farm. Mm-hmm. Oh, we have Farm Aid. Oh, isn't it terrible? But we still talk down about farmers. They still keep disappearing, and we don't do anything about it as a country, as a government. Why is that? We're making everything else a priority. And you know what else is a dichotomy? Nobody wants to work on a farm. No, it's dirty, it's terrible. But everybody knows it's the best way to raise a kid. My sons they go to job interviews, and they see in their job, you worked on a farm? You're hired. Why? Because they have a work ethic. They can take initiative. They have integrity. They're not working just for money. I mean, the skills, go raise your kids on a farm and you'll find out why you were so miserable living in the city. Sorry. Human again. This is about being Vermonters live here this is back to affirming the positive things about our culture. Is it perfect? No. Are all things in the city horrible? No. I love the city. I love Indian food. Yeah. I hate living in the kingdom with no Indian restaurants. I wish somebody would put one in there.
Yeah.
But
those things
but don't go to McDonald's.
Cultures is awesome and fun.
Do not do that to your children. Don't go to McDonald's. You're literally paying your oppressors. It's like paying cigarette companies to kill yourself. It's really a good deal.
People, I automatically last year when we were going back and forth from Vermont to Texas a lot because Benjamin's
setting, were you?
Yes, kind of a little bit actually. We were working on a couple of films for Benjamin and his film festival, and it was really exciting. But we tend to eat more fast food. We tend to not be good. I immediately lose 10 pounds when I come back to Vermont within even just a couple of weeks, and it's all like bloating and puffiness and
hydrogenated fats and chemicals.
And like upset belly.
You know, you've hit on something, because we went down to a trip. I got to meet Wendell Berry in September.
Cool.
And Joel Salatin and Sally Fallon, and watch our daughter graduate from boot camp. And we were in Missouri, and we were in Kentucky, and we were in Virginia, and we couldn't find any food that wasn't industrial. And we actually, one night, we ate in an IHOP. I had never eaten an IHOP. I had gastritis for 2 weeks.
I was going to say, how
I can't eat it. Oh, it was horrible. I felt bad for people that work there, that eat there, or anything. It just was, and that's because I'm used to eating healthy food. And so what I realized is in Vermont, we are the we can still buy local baked goods. You can buy stuff that you can't even find in other parts of the country. This is something we should rejoice about. And it should not be political. It should not be political.
It is not. This is not party. This is humanity.
And it's economics. And again, it's something that can unite us on many levels. And that's why I'm glad I was excited to come talk about it. I so much want people to see what's right in front of them. And they just have to grab it.
You had mentioned you wanting to talk about the economics of everything, and I sort of diverted us to a couple of other conversations first, but I want to make sure we get back to that. If there's anything you haven't gotten to talk about, we've already been talking for almost 90 minutes. And so this has gone by, this is the fastest that this show has ever gone by for me. And I feel like we could sit here and talk for like 3 or 4 hours. So we're probably going to have you back.
Okay.
Especially once the book gets greenlit. But why don't you talk? I want to make sure you have time to talk about the economic stuff. The chapter in the book that you said.
Well, and there are also, I mean, so one chapter in the book is about policy. Because there are a lot of books out there, and they go, oh, everybody should farm, and they don't tell you why. They don't tell you how they can make it happen. Joel Salatin's books, they don't really get at the crux of it. And that's where my background in finance and tax says, look, you can't expect people to be economically viable if you stack the deck against them economically. So there's a policy aspect. But the economic thing that is now, since I wrote the book in December was the first draft, and now we have Ukraine, and we have $4.50 a gallon gas for regular. I lived in the UK for years. I was paying $6 a gallon for gas in 1990. Americans do not comprehend what would happen to the entire economy of this nation is built on cheap fuel. And that's over now. And that's over regardless of what happens in Ukraine. And this is where it's very complex. But I suggest there's a great book on money supply by Milton Friedman called Money Mischief. And what it shows is how easy it is with a fiat currency for an irresponsible or immoral government to just print a bunch of money, because you can never track where it lands. And where it lands first and foremost in the pockets of real estate owners and stock market. That's why the stock market's going up, even while the economy is actually going down. But wages never keep pace. So this is a way to totally reboot the economy, destroy people on fixed incomes, not have to pay off your liabilities of $70 trillion that you've promised people that are unfunded, because now you've shrunk them all. So what I'm saying is, even if Ukraine was resolved tomorrow, the price of fuel is not going to go down. And because that price of fuel is so inextricably twined to your food supplies, the further away it's shipped, the more it's going to cost you. You start looking at how much it costs for that corn, subsidized or not, to till the land, then plant the land, then spray the land, then spray the land again, then harvest this stuff. And I mentioned no-till. So on an industrial scale, this has nothing to do with organics. Let's say you took 10 million acres of corn, and instead of plowing it every year, you did no-till. All right, so you don't stir up the ground, and you just do seed drilling with water seed drilling. It shoots the seeds in the ground. You will save so much carbon because when you turn over that soil, you're destroying and disrupting all of the root network and all the mitochondrial network and that whole microbiome. So that alone, that's something General Mills and large corporations can do that will right away reduce the fossil fuel use, reduce the chemicals, and save carbon if that's your thing. But it's irrelevant.
Why don't they do that?
They're starting to. Some of the large corporations, yes, Purdue is moving into a grass-fed operation for beef. I think Tyson is. They see it. They see it. They're, not all corporations are evil, and we need to ask them to be, and they're responsive. When organics comes out and says organics, just the fact that they're not really organic doesn't mean they're not being responsive. There's a reason we blame corporations. Why would we blame corporations for drinking soft drinks that kill us? You're the one that drinks them. And if you didn't buy them, they wouldn't put them on the shelf. 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, I talked here in Vermont about bottling water.
Yeah.
And my uncle said, "You're nuts. Nobody's ever going to pay any money for a bottle of water."
Except now. But
and now it's in plastic.
One of the things, and I was just actually having this conversation with somebody about this specific thing. And I was speaking in relation specifically to addiction, right? And so in my experience in recovery, the first thing I had to do was decide that I didn't want to do it anymore. I had to decide that this was not going to work for me, and that this was not what I wanted in my life. Now, in order to maintain that decision, there was a lot of other steps I had to take to stay stopped from consuming the drugs, right? Or the alcohol or whatever, fill in the blank. But then so much of our culture, right? We were talking about the consumer culture where the advertising is for the sugary cereals, and you've got Coca-Cola on, all the Super Bowls and the this and the that. And so where is the line, do you think, and that where we can say, yes, we're responsible for making our own decisions, but also you guys need to take responsibility for the fact that you're selling us poison?
Well, I think the line is always twofold, and it applies as well to everything else. And this is the whole idea of conservatism and how much we have individual responsibility. You hit it on earlier. If we leave it to the Green New Deal to solve the CO2 problem, then we failed. Because you cannot solve these problems with large, big pictures, because every individual choice you make and I make every day, that's what impacts the environment. What we choose to buy, what we choose to recycle, what we choose to not buy, what we choose to eat, what we choose to compost. The government's not going to make you compost. I mean, just think now. And in fact, something I talk about in the book is when they had water rationing in California because of the drought, and they said you had to ration water. Guess what? People used more water. They went out at 3 a.m. and turned on the water. This is called the tragedy of the Comets. All right, this is human nature. All right, sorry, we're laughing, but it's true when you think about it. So when you try to impose environmental conservation from the top down, people are resistant. By gosh, I'm going to eat 2 hamburgers then, because you might threaten it. So this is, by the way, this is what tax policy is all about. This is what I studied for years and why I was as a tax attorney, because you might intend to have a good tax benefit, and then you find out it always squeezes out. That's why we have a tax code this big.
Yep.
So the more you keep it simple and the more you keep it local. But back to your question then, as far as, responsibility.
Yeah.
If you don't take personal responsibility for what you eat, then you really who will you blame? We do have the information. We have the internet available. We can find out. Yes, it's overwhelming, and we do the best we can. But I've met so many people whose lives have been compromised by diet. You talked about addiction. Food is an addiction.
Yeah.
And something I've studied for many years is the efforts that were for many years hidden by tobacco companies to deliberately make nicotine more intense and aerosolized and make their products more addictive to people while telling you that they have the light version. How about diet sodas that make you fatter? That's partly psychological, because now you're like, hey, it's light, so
I can just drink more.
But also they're finding more and more there are chemicals in there. Now, if you read the book Hooked, which you could put a link up if you find it, next time I'll bring some books. Okay. And the book Hooked is absolutely horrifying how much they're developing new chemicals to prey on our addictions. And I'm a person that is a recovery coach, and I have dealt with it. And one of the things that shocked me in training was that when you take a young child's brain and you put it on sugar, it lights up more in the resonance imaging than a brain on cocaine. And then I looked at my own life. Sugar is a huge stimulant. Now, one of the things I found studying as well in my book is that in the 1950s and 60s, when Kellogg's Corporation and others decided you all had to eat carbohydrates and that food chain, how great those carbs are. Carbs are your problem. Carbs are where our pain and inflammation and health problems are coming from. Too many carbs, get rid of the carbs. Eat fat. Fat's good for you. Well, everything they've been teaching you was about them corporate profits. And there was testimony before Congress that the cereals, food, they had done a study, and that the cereals from Kellogg's, that if you fed rats a diet of cardboard sprayed with chemicals, with vitamins, that they grew faster than on the cornflakes, okay? So they started spraying them with chemicals because it literally had no nutritional content in it at all. And that's what I was raised on, okay? I didn't know better. I was eating Fruit Loops or whatever else. My family was poor, whatever you got. And we didn't know better. My mom didn't know better. Poor Vermonter. Canned food,
Well, that's part of the thing. And it's funny. And let me just say, first of all, thank you, Olga. Olga Mar is watching, and she's noting all the books.
I want to meet her.
She's noting all the books that you're mentioning. Which is awesome. But it's funny listening to you talk about this. It's just more examples of why I say I'm a small government conservative, because the government decided that was the food pyramid. The government decided what our food pyramid was, and it was influenced by lobbies and corporations and corporate interests and people who did not actually have our best interests at heart. And so then that goes into our school system, right? And the government says you have to teach this in school, even though it's bad and it's influenced by bad corporate actors. And so to me, it's like another example of why government control in all areas of our life is so detrimental and damaging.
History has proved it. It's not just our system. Throughout history, just about every culture, special interests. That's actually what they were trying to design in the United States Constitution, was to design something
framework.
to be, which we're still trying to hold together. We've managed this far to keep those special interests out. And now we just saw this battle over hunting rights in Vermont, which is about a tiny little minority trying to totally bypass the Constitution to shove everything down their throats. You think big food interests aren't doing that? I get back to the food issue because of your question, the addiction of food, they prey on it. Now we live in a culture where you're supposed to be proud of being 600 pounds and you make a TV show about it, kind of like sexualizing things for our children and telling them that there's no consequence to sexual promiscuity, that it's liberty. These are broader issues, but they do come back to the issue of individual responsibility, but also compassion. I really don't think that we do people a favor to tell them that if they eat, because once again, it's kind of like the cigarettes thing, okay? My son is addicted to cigarettes, and they are much, much more addictive than when I was addicted to cigarettes, okay? And I'm horrified when I read just how they've studied, and that's what they're doing with food. So you really have to look at McDonald's. You have to look at taste enhancers and whole new classes of drugs, which I'll be doing some more writing about this, but look at the book Hooked if you haven't read it. It's a hard read because it's terrifying. This is really right out of some kind of science fiction movie, but that's also why I say in this book, we need to stop and pause and start questioning some of these technologies, or at least balancing them against more traditional regenerative agricultural systems. Nobody loses in doing this except corporate profits. And that's why you will see those who attack me and say, oh no, we can only feed the world with great big combines that are run on computers with no human in them, and we eliminate the workforce. We now have like 1% of Americans are farmers, and they're largely running huge
corporate corn.
And so imagine if there were a Great Depression today, all right, just Vermonters, because we're on the verge of it, okay? We know it can never happen again because they'll print more money. That's not a solution. The more money they print, read Money Mischief, then it's kind of like addiction, and the less high you're going to get out of it. And that's going to create hyperinflation, potentially, depending on how you define it. So imagine, though, 1929, we're a nation of 100,000 people, or 100 million people. And we have 29,000 farms, and 90% of Americans are largely either farmers or tied to the agrarian industry, depending on who you talk to. And now we have 20 million people. Most don't know anything. They couldn't even grow a cactus. They couldn't water a cactus.
Correct.
And I say that with compassion, right? Because this is a vulnerable population. There are people smarter than I that suggest that we could lose a third to half of our entire population in a month if you just interrupted the food supply system. We're a just-in-time system. And it wouldn't necessarily be starvation. Look at the chaos that would result, and almost did. And now we're looking at food shortages.
Just when the pandemic happened.
And it was 2 weeks to slow the spread, and every grocery store in America was empty.
16 years of age, I worked stocking grocery shelves. And I knew that they would all be empty in 4 days. At 16 years of age, it hasn't changed. If anything, it's more vulnerable because in order to maximize profits, you want just-in-time inventory, just exactly the amount of inventory you want, as you know in accounting. So this is highly, highly dangerous. Now, if you take, and we had 29,000 farms, and they weren't big mega farms with 2,000 to 3,000 cows. They were little farms. And not only did they have cows, they had chickens, they had pigs, they had, and this was this rich cultural biological thing to draw upon. Right now, I already see prices of lambs and cows and pigs all going up this spring. And we're not even in, as farmers will tell you, this ain't the market yet. April, May, good luck finding them, okay? Because there's no inventory. You know, you can only replicate so many animals. And so you lose your animals at your peril, you become dependent. And everything that Vermont's been about forever has been about self-reliance. And we have the advent of this progressive push to make us more and more dependent. And the more poverty they inflict on us, then the more they want to rescue us.
Yeah.
The more that people are suffering from addiction, the more you have to create jobs for people with addiction and housing for people with addiction. Well, how about if they had housing and jobs beforehand, they wouldn't get addicted, especially if they're farmers.
I mean, that we could go on a rabbit trail.
Let's do it again. Can I share one little story with you?
Yes.
Let's hear about this.
So how about this?
We'll
share the
close with my story?
Yes.
All right.
All right. And if
I gotta go home.
I know. We started early so that he could leave early because he has a long drive home.
It's all good.
But
no, he needs the bathroom now. But I'll share a quick story because I thought of it on the way over, and I'm always trying to think of ways to entertain people and get a point across.
Okay.
So about 30 years ago now, I went with 3 Vermonters. I could name them, and we drove all the way to Virginia to go backpacking in the Blue Ridge Mountains because it was March and it was all too much snow up here. And we drive straight down there and we get out and we're going to go backpacking. And the 3 other guys, they go, "Hey, I got an idea. I've got some orange Kool-Aid and I want to pour it in my canteen." And they start pouring orange Kool-Aid into their water canteen. And I'm a very experienced hiker and I'm like, no way. The 3 of them put orange Kool-Aid in their canteen. And then we get up the mountain and we're on the top of the Blue Ridge Mountains and we couldn't find any water supply anywhere. And so all they had to eat was spaghetti. So they boiled spaghetti in their orange Kool-Aid and they couldn't eat it. And then it snowed 4 inches of snow. And the next morning, you got all these pots with orange spaghetti laying around. And I had my water. Don't drink the Kool-Aid, all right? Stick to the water. If you don't know where your water supply is going to come from, don't pollute your water supply. Our food supply is so horribly polluted. The more you become educated about it, the more horrified you are, then the more you're equipped to find your way out of the prison they're creating for you. They're going to microchip our cows. They're going to track every bit of food because that's how they control us. And that's how we'll give up our guns, our liberties, our free speech. We won't say a peep for that hamburger because none of us have ever been, most of us, a day without food. We don't know what real suffering is. And the Great Depression survivors and our forebears knew, and they left us the tools and the inheritance, and we're squandering it, and we need to reclaim it. We're one of the few places in the world that still can.
Amen. Amen.
That's Vermont. That's our future. Those are good things, and those should unite people.
Amen.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, John.
And you're going to win, I hope, because, if we just get you to voters, you're the better qualified candidate.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I think really more than anything, we need our elected officials to be responsive to their electorate and to actually have some real sense of what it's like to be a part of the working class, to be responsible for where your food comes from, to be thinking about the environment and the second and third order effects of the decisions that we make, not just doing things because they sound good or make us feel virtuous, but because they will actually make the lives of Vermonters and Americans better.
Well, Vermonters and candidates for both parties need to be looking at August and what $20 a pound hamburger means for their constituents. I mean, that's just an example. Maybe it'll be 30. We can look at Zimbabwe, where social justice policies were used to destroy farming in advancing, destroying the economy. South Africa as well.
Yep.
I'm writing about that. Completely destroy the economy. We're doing that in Vermont.
Yeah.
Instead of taking advantage of opportunities on the precipice of perhaps the greatest urgency in our country's history, and it's going to be about growing food.
Yep.
I know that just doesn't sound sexy, but you watch all the different political issues and even school choice and other things, and food could rate pretty high pretty quickly.
Yep.
But at any rate, thank you for having me.
Thank you, John. Thank you for being here. Thank you for everybody who watched and participated in the chat, made comments. Thank you again, Olga, for noting all the books that John mentioned. We should probably go back through and make sure we caught them all, because these are great resources, and this is really what Generally Irritable is about. It's about educating our neighbors, making sure that people have the information that they need to be happy and whole and successful. So thank you, everybody. We're going to close with the book commercial. So remember, you can support me. You can support the channel by going to Amazon.com and buying our book for $9.99. Buy one for yourself. Buy one as a gift. They make great, fun gifts for your friends and family, and they're a great way to troll people as well.
That's another thing.
But you can also go to the website, ericareddick.com. You can learn more about my campaign for U.S. House. You can find a link to the book. You can see information for my 2020 Senate campaign. There's ways to connect, donate, all of the things. And yeah, we just appreciate y'all so much, and have a great Sunday evening. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Here we go. Ready? We're going to close.
This book will give you wings!
What kind of wings?
Not like Icarus wings, like eagle's wings!
What about dragons?
You'll have dragon's blood! You'll be able to breathe fire!
Fire like the Ultra Eagle Dragon!
This book will make you smarter!
Yes!
I'm not just talking honor roll smart, I'm talking Nikola Tesla smart! You'll be so good looking, Brad Pitt will be jealous!
Do you want to make money?
How much money?
Elon Musk money.
That's a lot of money!
People will think you're Elon Musk, but you're not Elon Musk, but they'll think you're
Elon Musk, because you pay taxes like Elon Musk!
And you have to argue with Elizabeth Warren because she thinks you're Elon Musk. Do you want freedom?
How much freedom?
All the freedom. One to America. How much freedom do you want?
America!
Double America! Yeah!